All right, let's get into the most frustrating part of this football team, and that is the offensive side of the football. It's the same thing every week. It really is. Lack of execution, silly penalties, missed opportunities left and right. Just the same thing week in and week out. There were throws that were missed that should have been made. There were mistakes that were made in terms of, turning the ball over, I think, 4 times in one quarter. Obviously, throwing the 3 interceptions in the second quarter, which really we had to dig ourselves out of that hole for the rest of the game, and we really never got out of it. And even after then, we suffered a lot of penalties, a lot of big plays taken away. When you think about the Jarvis Landry catch on the 25-yard line on a big third down, that probably would have changed the game. At that moment in time, that was called back, I think, on a holding, I think on Jermon Bushrod. Stuff like that continues to happen with this football team. Big plays taken off the board, even touchdowns taken off the board in this particular game. Whether it was a bad call or not, it was a very ticky-tacky call. Probably shouldn't have been called. It was a tremendous play by Anthony Fasano, but it's the same thing each and every single week. I said this last time. It's not the same officiating crew every week. Even if you take that touchdown off the board, some of the plays that should have been made in that game that were taken away because of big plays, and getting our offense in down and distance, which affects play calling, would have been different. And this game would have been different. Outgain your opponent by 120-something yards. And the way we were killing them in the first quarter in terms of yardage and all that other stuff. The only way you can explain, if you looked at the box score and you look at some of the stats, us losing that game is turnovers. And that, like I said, we were really digging ourselves out of a hole after the flurry of turnovers that were committed. Jay Cutler, when he was in there, really didn't. I mean, he was throwing. Some of his throws, everybody wants to blame Devontae Parker because it hit his hands, and then McLean picked it off. That throw wasn't. He really has struggled all year at really driving on his throws. You see a lot of throws where, like I brought up last time, one of the bigger reasons why our run after the catch numbers have been so down, especially with Jarvis Landry, is he doesn't throw anybody in stride. He's really struggled with some of those footballs. Kind of similar to that throw there. Obviously, the throw across his body to Quan Alexander. And then I can't even... the interception on the goal line. Again, that was another critical mistake in the game. You have an opportunity for points, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown, and then you turn the ball over. What bad football teams do. They commit a ton of penalties. They turn the ball over. And we're a good enough football team where we almost got out of it. Obviously, we'll talk about what the defense did, but it's just not good enough. You can't win on a consistent basis performing how we do each and every single week. Again, the guards continue to be an issue on this football team. Jermon Bushrod, Jesse Davis was switched in. Sam Young was switched out to tackle for a little bit there. But whoever is at guard really has struggled all year long, especially just Jermon, Jesse, Ted Larson has really struggled. And a lot of those penalties are coming from the guard positions. And it's unfortunate. Again, the penalties is what kills me the most. Like I said, when you outgain your opponent by 100-plus yards and you still don't win the football game. We had 448 yards of total offense, almost 500 yards of total offense. Our offense performed at a high level. It was the just self-inflicting wounds that really continue to plague this football team. And it's a consistent thing. It's not like, okay, this one game they were a little bit undisciplined. We almost broke the franchise record for penalties in this game, which was 18, which I think was set in the early stages of the franchise in the 60s, for God's sakes. So it just needs to stop. This team lacks a lot of things right now, and it's deficient in a lot of areas. And mostly, it's just turnovers and mistakes that should not have been made. Missed opportunities have really plagued this offense. When you talk about what the receivers were able to do on Sunday, they had a tremendous game. If it wasn't for penalties, Jarvis would have went well over 100 yards. He was just short of that. Kenny Stills had 180. That was the Kenny Stills that we saw last year that was able to stretch the field. Adam Gase was aggressive with him last year. Even, we haven't really seen that this year. And he was aggressive. He stretched the field. He was our big play guy, which he was last year, and he, did the same thing this year. I think Kenny almost had 10 touchdowns last year, and his average was ridiculous last year. This year, not so much. But he really reverted back to that Kenny Stills. That was that big play guy last year. I mean, I don't know how many receptions he had, but it wasn't a ton. But he had one of his best games of his career on Sunday in a losing effort. He went 180, right? Jarvis, I think, had 92 on 6 receptions. Williams had that big, 66-yard run in the first quarter, I think the first play from scrimmage. That he really was quiet after that. The running game was the only aspect of this particular game that we really couldn't get going. It was pretty much quiet after that first quarter. But the passing game was on point. When Jay Cutler was in there, it wasn't terrible. I mean, if it wasn't for the turnovers, who knows what happens. But when Matt Moore was in there, it was undoubtedly a better football team in terms of just rhythm and pace and continuity with his teammates. Matt Moore, he threw some of the positives of this game. In the pocket, he threw with great anticipation. He converted a ton of 3rd and longs, and I mean a ton, and not a 3rd and 8. I'm talking 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 13s on a front 7 that is very talented. They haven't got a lot of sacks this year. They've had their own issues, but they're a talented front, and they like to blitz. And Gerald McCoy, obviously former All-Pro defensive lineman, he had a great effect on this football game. But some of those plays he made on the run, just an absolute dot to Kenny Stills on the sideline. Matt had a really good game. Again, if it wasn't for just self-inflicting wounds, which, again, when you look at this game, when you have 448 yards of offense, and most of that, who knows how many yards we would have had if it wasn't for penalties, we would definitely would have won the game. I felt like we were killing them on offense the entire game. I didn't think we punted until the tail end of the second quarter because of turnovers, obviously. And other than that, we just didn't punt. So our offense was performing at a high level. It was just the self-inflicting wounds that continued to plague this football team. One thing I'll say before we switch to the defense, and it's so frustrating as a fan to watch a game like that because it's like I don't understand what else we have to do because we're watching it work, but it's like it's a mirage, like it didn't actually happen. It's very frustrating. But what was I about to say? Okay, yeah, the offense. Listen, we're 4-6. It's going to be a very, very hard, tough road because we had to win this game because this was a dysfunctional franchise at best that has a locker room filled with a bunch of children in it because obviously you saw what Jameis Winston acted like, Mike Evans. I mean, that team has been dysfunctional all season long. They're a talented football team, but they're obviously a very dysfunctional franchise. How we lost to them, this is a very low point in the season, just to say the least. I mean, it's a very low point. So we had to beat the Buccaneers. We had to beat either the Panthers, Chiefs, or Patriots once, and then sweep the Bills to get in. Good news is everybody else in the AFC is 4-6. The Ravens have the wild card at 5-5. The Bills, if they continue I think Sean McDermott has completely lost his team with the way he treated the Tyrod Taylor situation. So the Bills games shouldn't be totally difficult, but with this team, you never know. I mean, we just lost to the Buccaneers. There's a chance, but there's a very, very slim chance. At best, even if we somehow made the playoffs, this has been a very disappointing season, especially how this team was playing earlier on. When you think about the 4-2 record that we had and how we got there, it's very impressive. Comebacks against the Falcons, I mean, some of those wins were amazing. The Jets, those are really, really solid wins. And it just, we lost it. And to be, again, like I said, whatever happens, somehow we salvage the season. Even if we don't make the playoffs, we somehow finish strong. It's a very disappointing season. This team was talented, especially on the offensive side of the football. I think we underestimated how bad the guards were. I didn't think the guards would perform at this low of a level, especially since in preseason they didn't play terrible. And they got first-team reps. It wasn't like they were going to get second and third-string players. So that's been very disappointing. But overall, this team has been very, very, very disappointing this season. And the players are to blame more than anything, especially on the offensive side of the football. I thought the game plan, again, Adam Gase called a great game. He called a tremendous game, in my opinion. It just was not executed well, and too many penalties and too many missed opportunities. Again, there were missed throws that, if made, may have resulted in touchdowns or, at the very least, big chunk of yards. I think Kenny Stills was missed. He was wide open multiple times that game. He was missed a couple times. So it is what it is. Before we move into the defensive side, this more on the podcast, but I feel the need to talk about it anyway. this offense is talented. They're very talented. There's a couple things on this offense that needs to be changed. The quarterback position is one of those. The guards, obviously, those need to be priorities. Other than that, the running backs this tandem is pretty good. They're pretty dang good. The receivers are tremendously talented. Devontae Parker, to be honest with you, is the weakest link. Kenny Stills and Jarvis Landry, at any given game, can go over 100 yards. Same thing with Devontae Parker, if healthy, which he hasn't been. And I think that's something we should expect for the rest of his career. Is he's gonna miss at least 2 or 3 games a year on average, maybe even more than that. But if Devontae's healthy, he can be a playmaker as well. The receivers do not need to be redone. They're fine. The tight end, huge need there. Guards, huge need there. Quarterback, Tannehill's coming back. If he's healthy, I think he's going to have a really good year if he fixes some of these things on offense. But I don't want to go into this offseason thinking whoever has the final decision, which I hope it's Adam Gase, because I know he's not going to get rid of Adam or Jarvis and Kenny. And I'm not even joking when I say this. If we have to tear some things down to keep those players, then do it. Because these players are young and they have a very bright future. And they can have a long career here in Miami. Obviously, Kenny's locked up. Jarvis needs to be locked up. Juwan needs to be locked up. If there's certain players on the defensive side that we have to let go because of that, then I would agree. Because the front 7, we're paying a ton of cash. And we have young players on it that have a bright future. When you talk about Devon Gottschalk, Vincent Taylor, they have a bright future. Charles Harris, bright future. Cam White can hold down the fort for one more season if he needs to, if we decide not to go through free agency or the draft at that position. So there are certain players that we can let go of on that side to retain some players on offense, because I think it's going to be important. This offensive nucleus, it's very hard to get this talented of a receiver core in the NFL in general. If we decide, first of all, it's important that Tannehill has his talent around him when he comes back. But if we decide to draft a quarterback to groom, it's important that we have these players if said quarterback eventually, takes over the helm, or Tannehill is the guy that we choose to go with for the rest of the year, which I have a lot of confidence in. But it's important that we keep these talented players at the skill positions on the offense, especially the offensive line. Because I honestly do believe if we butcher this, it's going to be hard to get that back. It's going to be very hard. Very, very, very hard to get that back. So that's all I have to say about the offense. It's not the receivers' fault. It's not some of the players. It's not Matt Moore's fault. It's just lack of execution and stupid and boneheaded plays by our football team that lost us that game. All right, let's talk about the defensive side of the football. This was the worst game, and not statistically speaking, and not even really from it's a tough one to say what the worst defensive game has been of the year, because there's been a lot of bad ones, but the defense has really reverted back to what we thought they were going to be in the preseason. We didn't think this defense was going to be tremendously good. We thought the offense was by far the most talented of the two, and we thought the defense might struggle for a while the offense is going to be red hot. Hasn't been that way. The offense really has started to get off to a good rhythm here lately. The defense is really starting to revert back, like I said, to what we thought they were going to be in the preseason, which is not a very good defense. And they performed like a not a very good defense in this particular game. They didn't really allow a whole lot in that second half. They did a pretty good job. In the first half, if it wasn't for turnovers, they wouldn't have allowed that many points. But the reason I say it's a poor performance is, one, we have had a terrible goal line defense all season long. I think we have the worst goal line defense in the NFL. Big reason for that in this particular game is we had Ryan Fitzpatrick in a 3rd and goal situation, or it was going to be 3rd and goal, but Sue decided, and it was actually called on Kiko Alonso to commit a late hit on the quarterback. That is an unintelligent football play. That is a bonehead football play that cost us 7 points. So stuff like that really hurt us on the defensive side of the football. But again, the goal line defense has been atrocious all season long. We've really, in the secondary, especially in this game, performed at a very low level, especially at the last drive of the game. Some of those throws were wide open. I mean, we could have put Nathan Peterman in there, and he would have made some of those throws. That's how wide open they were. There was not enough tight coverage, and and Ryan Fitzpatrick obviously took advantage of that. That last drive was very hard to watch as a fan, because basically we were watching our season go. Our season just disappear in front of us as that drive was happening. And the defense was not able to get pressure. Granted, the offensive line, believe it or not, of the Buccaneers has been pretty stout all year. I think they're in the top 10. They haven't allowed a lot of sacks all year. They're in the top 10 in that category. So they're a pretty good unit. But I feel like our unit's pretty good as well. And a lot of the reasons why we couldn't get pressure on the quarterback, actually I was going to say it's because the secondary didn't perform at a high level. They didn't play it well, and that's why we really couldn't consistently get to the quarterback, because our secondary didn't cover long enough. But there were plays in that game where the defensive line also failed our secondary. Our containment of Ryan Fitzpatrick was atrocious all game long. There was a lot of plays where he was able to escape the pocket and find open receivers down the football field. A lot of plays, a lot of crucial plays where that happened. Our containment and our gap assignments were very bad. In really closing in the pocket on him was really bad. And the secondary, like I said, was very poor on that last drive, and they were poor all game long. I mean, there were plays where Mike Evans was just wide open. I understand if Mike Evans is going to catch a tough catch, we'll make him catch a tough catch. So there are certain areas of this defense that really underperformed in this particular game, and it's basically been the same things that this defense has struggled with all year. Goal line defense has been abysmal. The secondary failure to really have tight coverage on a consistent basis and man-to-man coverage has been an issue. Containment of the quarterback in the pocket has been an issue. I refuse to believe that this defensive line, because it's an uber talented line, it's very athletic. I mean, when we talk about some of the defensive linemen that we added this year, I think it's more of a schematic issue than anything. I think it's more of a coaching issue on that aspect of this football team, because you have to understand, like, either somebody is not preparing these players well enough for the particular player that they're playing this particular week. It has to be that, because if you look at a Dallas Cowboys front seven, it's not as talented as ours, and they do a tremendous job each and every single week coming in with a different game plan, because they're adapting to whatever opponent they're playing and really attacking their weaknesses. We don't do that on this defense at all, and it's very frustrating. And you could see, like I said, the D-line was very ill-prepared to go against Ryan Fitzpatrick in this particular game. I felt like, some plays that were interesting, like, we were blitzing in goal line situations. We just couldn't execute certain plays. Obviously, guarding tight ends all year has been an issue. Last year it was a huge issue. That continues to be a problem this year. There's a lot of things on the defensive side that needs to be fixed. Obviously, going out and somehow either drafting one or finding a good complement for the future to Cordrea Tankersley is very important. I think we do need to play. I'm ready to say now that we need to play Torrey McTyer and see what he's got. Xavier has struggled all season, and whether he can ever rebound in his career or not is really not the question. But somebody else needs to come in, and we'll see how they perform at this point in the season. I don't think this upcoming week is a good time to do it, since we're going to get to Tom Brady. I think Xavier needs to still play. But the secondary obviously is an issue that needs to be addressed. The linebacker unit will improve next year, getting Raekwon back. But I think Lawrence needs to go. I think we need to go with somebody a little bit younger, either through the draft or free agency at that position. So there's a lot of issues that need to be figured out on defense. They're very minor, though. Like I said, you could go through the draft and fix most of these. Like, if we go out and get a young linebacker in the draft, there's a couple good ones that are coming out. That's an easy fix that we can fix in the later rounds. The safeties are really good. The corner is an issue. But other than that, like one corner, I think Cordrea is going to have a tremendous career ahead of him. One corner, maybe a weak side linebacker on the defensive side are really the only things that I think we really need to prioritize on this defense. But again, a very poor job of this defense in the waning stages of the game to really get the other team off the field. And we've struggled with that all season long. When you think about the Chargers, if it wasn't for a missed field goal, we lose that game. You think about the Falcons, if it wasn't for a tremendous play by the Rook, Cordrea, we lose that game. So, it's been very difficult for this defense. One of its worst performances in terms of just not finishing the game well enough, not getting pressure on the quarterback enough. And then again, secondary and front seven goes hand in hand. So they can blame each other for certain plays. Because one play, the secondary played well. The other play, the defense really didn't contain Ryan Fitzpatrick, allowed him to make plays with his legs and find playmakers downfield. So just an uber frustrating game, very frustrating game for this football team. And one of the low points of this franchise is of the last 2 years, really, one of the lower points, because this team, like I said, we were going against a very dysfunctional organization that has had a terrible season all year long, and we just couldn't get it done. And if you think about where we would be right now if we beat them, we'd be 5-5, right with the Baltimore Ravens, ahead of a lot of people in the AFC for that wild card spot, primed position to make the playoffs. So it's a very unfortunate loss, and it's just a loss that really this had the fingerprint of how we've lost multiple games this year on it, and it's very unfortunate. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. It's a very tough loss to take. I know this is the most depressed I've been about this team in a very long time, and I'm Skagster1083, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.